There is a moment in a person's life when the floor doesn't just fall away. It vanishes, and you realize it was never really there to begin with. It's not the kind of collapse that makes the news. It doesn't show up on a scanner or in a hospital report. It's the quiet kind. The kind where you wake up one morning and the person you used to be is gone, and in their place is a stranger, sitting in your skin, looking out through your eyes, asking a question you don't know how to answer. Who am I now? This is the part of the journey they leave out of the books. The part they don't put on the inspirational posters. They show you the before and the after, the suffering and the enlightenment. But they never show you the middle. They never show you the place where you have to sit in the wreckage of everything you thought you were, with no guarantee that anything will ever grow back. Section 1. The linear illusion. We are raised on a diet of linear stories. From the fairy tales we hear as children to the motivational content we consume as adults, the message is always the same. You struggle, you learn, you grow, you win. The hero's journey has a clear arc. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a problem and a solution. There's a version of you at the start who is lacking, and a version of you at the end who has arrived. But the soul doesn't move in a straight line. This is the first illusion that has to shatter. The soul spirals. It descends. It circles back to the same wounds, asking us to look at them with new eyes, from a new depth, with a new level of honesty that we simply didn't possess the first 10 times we visited. And sometimes, the descent feels less like growth, and less like progress, and more like dying. Because it is. It's the death of a version of you that was never meant to last forever. It's the funeral of a personality that served its purpose, protected you through a specific season of life, and is now asking to be laid to rest. But we don't know how to hold funerals for our identities. We know how to bury people. We don't know how to bury the masks we've worn. So they don't bury easily. They haunt us. They show up in our dreams, in our anxieties, in the quiet moments when we're alone and we don't know who we're supposed to be without them. Carl Jung, the old psychiatrist who spent his life mapping the unseen territories of the mind, wrote about this extensively. He said that the gold is in the dark, but he also knew, with a precision that only comes from personal descent, that to find that gold, you have to be willing to get your hands dirty. You have to be willing to dig through the layers of persona you've built, the masks you've worn so long they've fused to your face. And when you start to pull those masks away, it doesn't feel like liberation at first. It feels like flaying. It feels like you're removing your own skin. Section 2. The armor becomes the prison. Let's talk about that armor for a moment. The personality you constructed wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a sign of inauthenticity. It was a survival mechanism. It was the suit of armor you forged in childhood to navigate a world that didn't always make sense, that didn't always feel safe. It was brilliant, actually. It learned to smile when it wanted to cry. It learned to agree when it wanted to scream. It learned to perform for love, to achieve for approval, to hide for safety. And it worked. Don't underestimate that. It worked. It got you through. It got you through school. It got you through family dynamics. It got you through social situations that felt like minefields. It was a masterpiece of engineering, built by a child with limited resources and an unlimited will to survive. But here's the problem that no one warns you about. The armor that protects you in one season becomes the prison that confines you in the next. What kept you safe at 10 is suffocating you at 30. What helped you fit in as a teenager is preventing you from standing out as an adult. What allowed you to survive your environment is now stopping you from evolving beyond it. The armor doesn't know how to take itself off. It was designed to be permanent. It was designed to become you. And in many ways it did. It became the voice in your head. It became the filter through which you see the world. It became the set of rules you live by without even knowing you're following them. This is why awakening is so disorienting. It doesn't start with a download of cosmic truth from some external source. It starts with a crack in the armor. Something happens that the armor can't handle. A loss, a betrayal, a quiet Tuesday night where you're doing everything right, everything you're supposed to do, and you realize you feel nothing at all. And through that crack, the light gets in, yes. That's the poetic part. But so does the cold. So does the silence. So does the terrifying realization that the life you've been living was built on a scaffold of assumptions you never thought to question. Assumptions about who you are, about what matters, about what's possible. Question 1. What happens when the goals you've been chasing finally lose their shine? What happens when you get what you wanted and realize it tastes like ash? This is the moment the mind starts to short-circuit. Because the mind was built to solve problems, to chase rewards, to move from point A to point B. That's its function. That's what it's good at. Give it a problem, it finds a solution. Give it a goal, it creates a plan. Give it a desire, it pursues fulfillment. But what happens when point B turns out to be a mirage? What happens when the solution doesn't solve anything? What happens when the fulfillment doesn't fulfill? The mind doesn't have a protocol for that. It runs in circles. It tries harder. It changes the goal. It finds a new desire. It does anything to avoid the one question it can't answer. What if the whole game is rigged? You are left in the desert. Not the desert of lack, but the desert of too much. Too much success that felt empty. Too much approval that felt hollow. Too much noise that couldn't drown out the silence inside. And the desert doesn't give you answers. It gives you silence. It gives you heat. It gives you the unfiltered exposure to your own reflection. There is nowhere to hide in the desert. The distractions you used to rely on, the noise, the busyness, the validation from others, the constant stimulation, they all start to feel thin, transparent. You can see through them now. You can see the mechanism. You can see the strings, and they can no longer hold you. Section 3. The Dark Night. This is what the mystics across every tradition have called the dark night of the soul. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, usually to describe a bad week or a difficult patch. But the real dark night is not a metaphor for a temporary struggle. It's a profound, systemic unmaking. It's the ego's last stand. And the ego, make no mistake, is a formidable opponent. It has been running the show for your entire life. It has the keys to every door, the script for every conversation, the map for every situation. It knows your weaknesses better than you do because it built them. It knows your triggers because it installed them. It knows how to make you afraid because fear is its native language. When you tell the ego its services are no longer required, when you decide consciously or unconsciously to stop living from its programming, it doesn't just hand over the keys and walk away. It sets the house on fire. It burns everything down on its way out, hoping you'll run back into the flames to save the furniture. You will feel like you're going mad, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, with visions and screaming, but in a quiet, creeping, insidious way. You'll be in a room full of people and feel completely invisible, like you're watching them through a pane of glass they can't see through. You'll do things you used to love and feel nothing, absolutely nothing, just a flat gray numbness where passion used to live. You'll look at your partner, your parents, your closest friends, and wonder if you ever really knew them, or if you just knew the roles you were all playing for each other. The husband role, the wife role, the successful friend role, the dutiful child role. The script is gone. The theater is empty. And you're standing on stage, in the dark, with no lines, no cues, and no idea if the audience is even still there. And the most terrifying part? You start to realize that you were the audience. You were sitting in the dark, watching your own life, waiting for it to begin, waiting for the main event, waiting for the moment when you would finally feel like you had arrived. And now you see. The show was always happening. You just weren't in it. You were watching it from behind the armor. Question 2. We are trained to be terrified of this emptiness. The culture tells us that to be empty is to be a failure. To be lost is to be weak. To not know is to be inadequate. But what if we have it backwards? What if the emptiness is not a void to be filled, but a space to be held sacred? What if the unmaking is not a mistake, but a preparation? Think about the process of building anything real, anything that lasts. You cannot pour new foundations until you've cleared the old rubble. You cannot plant new seeds until you've pulled the dead roots from the soil. If you try to build on top of the old structure, you're just renovating a condemned building. It looks better for a while, but the first real storm will bring it down. The soul is doing the same thing. It is clearing the ground. It is removing the debris of identities that were never yours to begin with. The dreams you inherited from your parents, the values you absorbed from your culture, the fears you adopted from a world that profits from your insecurity. All of it has to go. And the clearing process is violent. It is disruptive. It is not polite. It doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It happens when it happens, and your only choice is how you meet it. Will you meet it with resistance, which will only prolong the pain? Or will you meet it with a kind of terrified surrender, knowing that the only way out is through? You will be asked to let go of things you swore you'd never let go of. Relationships that defined you, that gave you a sense of identity. You'll realize you stayed in them not because of love, but because of comfort. Because not knowing who you are without that person is more terrifying than being unhappy with them. Identities that comforted you. The identity of the good person, the successful person, the spiritual person, the victim, the rescuer. All of them have to be examined. All of them have to be held up to the light and questioned. Is this true? Or is this just a story I've been telling myself? Beliefs that anchored you. Beliefs about how the world works. About what's possible. About what you deserve. Some of them will survive the examination. Most of them won't. And watching them fall away is like watching the floor collapse beneath your feet, floor by floor, until you're standing on nothing. And you will cling to them. Of course you will. It's instinct. It's survival. You'll bargain with the universe.
You'll say, I'll change everything else. I'll do the work. I'll meditate. I'll go to therapy. I'll read all the books. Just let me keep this one thing. Just let me keep this one version of myself. I'm not ready to be nobody. I'm not ready to face the world without my armor. But the self you're clinging to is the one that's drowning you. It's the weight tied to your ankle.
It's the anchor that's keeping you from surfacing. And the only way to survive the descent is to cut the line, to let it sink, to watch it disappear into the dark water and trust, with a faith you don't yet have, that you don't need it to breathe, that you were never meant to breathe underwater while carrying that weight, that the breath you're looking for is on the surface, but you can't reach it until you're light enough to rise. Question 3. This is the initiation that no one volunteers for. You don't sign up for this. You don't put it on your vision board. You don't manifest it. It signs you up. It finds you when you're ready, or more often, when you're broken enough to have no other choice. And it asks you one question, over and over, in 1,000 different ways, through 1,000 different losses. Are you willing to be real? Not successful. Not impressive. Not admired. Not liked. Not even healed, whatever that means. Real, because real is the only thing that survives the fire. The persona burns. The achievements turn to ash. The opinions of others become smoke that dissipates in the wind. What remains? What is the core element that cannot be consumed? What is the part of you that was there before your parents named you, before the world told you who to be, before the wounding and the masking and the forgetting? Most people turn back before they find out. They get to the edge of the fire, and they run. They feel the heat and they retreat. They find new distractions. They build a new, more spiritual-sounding persona. They start collecting philosophies like souvenirs, using them to decorate the walls of their rebuilt prison. They talk about awakening, about healing, about shadow work. They use the right words. They go to the right retreats. They post the right quotes. But they don't descend. They just redecorate. The shadow doesn't care about your vocabulary. It doesn't care how many books you've read or how many podcasts you've listened to. It doesn't care about your Instagram feed or your morning routine. The shadow speaks in a language older than words. It speaks in your body. It speaks in your triggers. It speaks in the sudden flash of irrational anger when someone touches a nerve you didn't know you had, a nerve that's been exposed and raw for decades. It speaks in the quiet, gnawing envy you feel when a friend succeeds, that voice that whispers, "Why them and not me?" It speaks in the addictive pull toward behaviors you know are destroying you, the compulsive need to escape your own presence, because being alone with yourself feels like being in a room with an accusing stranger. The shadow is not your enemy. This is the paradox that breaks the mind. This is the teaching that cannot be understood, only experienced. We've been taught to see our darkness as something to be fought, suppressed, or transcended. We've been told to focus on the light, to think positive, to rise above. But the shadow is just the part of your soul that didn't get enough light to grow. It's the part that was rejected, shamed, or abandoned. It's the part you disowned because it wasn't acceptable, it wasn't lovable, it wasn't safe, and it has been waiting, patiently, sometimes for decades, for you to turn around and look at it, not with judgment, not with a fix, not with spiritual bypassing or positive affirmations, but with the simple, radical act of attention, with presence, with the willingness to say, "I see you, I feel you. You are part of me, and you are allowed to exist." What would it mean to sit with your own rage? Not to act on it, not to justify it, not to project it onto someone else and blame them for it, but to simply feel its heat in your chest, to let it be there, without trying to make it go away, without trying to transmute it into something more acceptable, to just sit in the fire and let it burn without running? What would it mean to hold your own grief like a child? To let the tears come without a story attached to them? Not the tears of "why did this happen to me?" but the tears of simply feeling the immense weight of being human, the accumulated sorrow of a lifetime of small losses, small betrayals, small abandonments, all stored in the body, waiting for permission to be released? This is the work. This is the descent. This is what the mystics meant by the dark night. It is not about understanding the shadow intellectually. You can't think your way through this. It's about feeling it somatically. It's about letting the pain move through you, like a wave, instead of storing it in the vault of your nervous system, where it calcifies, where it turns into bitterness, where it turns into control, where it turns into the slow, quiet erosion of your vitality, your spontaneity, your capacity for joy. Question 4, and this is why so few make it. This is why most people don't survive their awakening. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack willpower, but because feeling is the one thing we were all trained to avoid at all costs. From the moment we were told stop crying as children, we learned that our emotions were inconvenient, that our depth was a burden, that to be acceptable, to be loved, to be safe, we had to live in the shallow end of the pool. We had to keep our feelings to ourselves. We had to put on a happy face. We had to pretend we were fine when we were drowning. We learned to perform happiness. We learned to manufacture calm. We learned to say I'm okay when we were falling apart inside. We learned to disconnect from our bodies because our bodies were telling us the truth, and the truth was too much for our environment to handle. So we left our bodies. We went up into our heads. We became thinkers instead of feelers. We became observers instead of participants. And we got really good at it. We built entire lives up in our heads. We built careers, relationships, identities, all from the neck up. But below the neck, below the surface, the body was still holding the score. The unprocessed grief, the unexpressed rage, the unmet longing, all of it was still there, waiting, stored in muscle and tissue and nerve. Awakening is the decision to stop pretending. It's the decision to come back into the body, to feel what you feel, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's terrifying, even if it feels like it might kill you. It's the decision to drown consciously, to let the water fill your lungs, to stop fighting for the surface. Because you know, with a knowing that isn't logical, but is somehow deeper than logic, that on the other side of that drowning is a different kind of breathing. A breath that doesn't depend on the atmosphere created by other people's expectations. A breath that comes from your own lungs, your own essence, your own being. There is a power that comes from this. But it's not the power the world recognizes. It's not loud. It's not dominant. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need validation. It's the power of someone who has stopped running. Someone who can sit in a room alone and feel complete, not because the room is full, but because they are full. Full of themselves. Full of their own presence. Someone who can hear criticism without collapsing and praise without inflating. Someone who is no longer for sale. No longer for sale to the highest bidder of approval. No longer for sale to the promise of status. No longer for sale to the fear of rejection. This is the fruit of the unmaking. This is what grows in the ashes. You become unbuyable. You become immune to the manipulation of approval. You stop needing the world to tell you you're okay, because you have met yourself in the dark. You have sat with yourself in the void. You have held your own hand through the fire, and you have discovered that you are okay. Not because you're perfect, not because you're healed, but because you're real, because you're here, because you stayed. Question 5. The journey doesn't end in the void. This is important. You don't live there forever. You pass through it. It's a passage, not a destination. It's a birth canal, not a grave. On the other side, you start to build again. But this time, you build from a different blueprint. You build from essence instead of ego. You build from what is true instead of what is safe. You build from the ground up, and the ground has been tested. It's been burned and cleared. You know what it's made of now. You know it can hold weight because you've tested it with your own collapse. The relationships you form after the descent have a different texture. They are not based on need or codependence. They are not based on two incomplete people trying to complete each other. They are based on the quiet joy of two whole people choosing to walk near each other. Two people who don't need each other to survive, but who enrich each other's lives by their presence. You stop looking for someone to save you. You stop looking for someone to fix you. You stop looking for someone to tell you who you are, because you've already done that work. You've already saved yourself. You've already sat with your own broken pieces and held them with compassion. Now, relationship becomes a sharing of wholeness, not a search for it. The work you do after the descent has a different signature. It's not about proving your worth. It's not about climbing ladders or collecting achievements. It's about expressing what you are. It flows from you like water from a spring, not because you're trying to irrigate the world, but because that's what water does. It moves. It nourishes. It reflects the sky. It doesn't try to be useful. It just is what it is, and in its being, it becomes the source of life for everything around it. You stop asking, "What should I do with my life?" and start asking, "Who am I being right now?" Because you realize that being precedes doing. The energy you bring to a room is more powerful than any action you take within it. The frequency you emit is more influential than any words you speak. A person who has been through the fire brings a frequency of grounded presence that cannot be faked. It can only be earned. It can only be forged. It's the frequency of someone who has died and come back. Someone who knows the way because they've walked it. Someone whose calm isn't a defense mechanism, but a genuine state of being. And you will notice it in yourself. You'll notice that you argue less. Not because you've given up. Not because you're suppressing your truth. But because you no longer need to be right. You no longer need to win. You no longer need to convince anyone of anything. You know what you know. And that's enough. If someone else sees it, beautiful. If they don't, also beautiful. Their perception doesn't change your reality. You'll notice that you explain yourself less. Not because you're hiding. Not because you're being secretive. But because you've realized something profound. Those who need an explanation won't understand it, no matter how many words you use. And those who can understand it don't need one. They can feel you. They can see you. They can sense the truth of you without a single word being spoken. There is a loneliness to this path. Let's not pretend otherwise. There's a loneliness to outgrowing the versions of yourself that others fell in love with. There's a loneliness to seeing clearly in a world that prefers to stay asleep. There's a loneliness to speaking truth in a culture that rewards performance. But it's a holy loneliness. It's the loneliness of the mountaintop, not the isolation of the dungeon. It's the loneliness of the pioneer, not the exile of the outcast. You can see further now. You can see the patterns that others are caught in. You can see the loops they're running because you used to run them yourself. You can see the armor they're wearing because you used to wear it. You can see the fear behind their eyes because you felt it in your own. And you feel compassion, not pity. Pity is looking down. Compassion is looking across. Not a desire to save them because you know you can't. Not a frustration that they don't see what you see because you remember not seeing it yourself. Just a deep, quiet, patient understanding that everyone is on their own timeline, that every soul has its own curriculum, that the only person you are responsible for awakening is yourself. Question 6. This is the final letting go. This is the last death before the rebirth. The release of the savior complex. The death of the need to fix others. The surrender of the idea that it's your job to wake anyone up. You realize that your presence is enough. Your embodiment is your teaching. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. You don't need to preach. You don't need to persuade. You just need to remain true to the frequency you've found. You just need to stay anchored in the truth that was forged in your own fire. And that frequency, that steady, grounded, unshakable aliveness, will do its own work in the world. It will disturb some. It will attract others. It will simply be what it is. Some people will walk into your presence and feel confronted. They'll feel the discomfort of their own unexamined life reflected back at them. And they'll blame you for it. They'll pull away. They'll judge. They'll project. Others will walk into your presence and feel something they've been longing for. They'll feel a sense of homecoming. They'll feel permission to be real themselves. They won't need you to say anything. They'll just feel it. And that feeling might be the catalyst for their own descent, their own unmaking, their own journey into the fire. But that's not your doing. That's their soul responding to its own truth. You're just a mirror. A clean mirror. A mirror that isn't trying to be anything other than reflective. Your job isn't to manage what people see in the mirror. Your job is to remain the mirror. to remain clear, to remain present, to remain unclouded by your own unexamined stuff. And you will be okay with this. More than okay. You will be at peace. Not the peace of a still pond that never gets disturbed. That's not real peace, that's avoidance. But the peace of a deep ocean. Calm on the surface, regardless of the weather, but teeming with life in the depths. A peace that isn't dependent on external conditions. A peace that comes from knowing who you are. And more importantly, knowing that who you are is not dependent on anything outside of you. You will carry the memory of the fire with you. Not as a scar, although there may be scars. Not as a wound, although some wounds may never fully heal. But as a source of warmth. As a reminder of what you survived. As proof of what's possible. You will know that you can be broken and whole at the same time. That these are not opposites. That wholeness includes the broken pieces. That healing is not about becoming unbroken, but about integrating the broken parts into a new kind of wholeness. You will know that you can be wounded and wise. That the wound, when attended to, becomes a source of wisdom. That the places where you were broken are the places where the light gets in, and also the places where your light can shine out to illuminate the path for others. You will know that you can be terrified and trust. That fear doesn't have to stop you. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to feel it and move forward anyway. That trust is not the certainty that everything will be okay, but the confidence that you can handle whatever happens. Because you've handled worse. You've handled the fire. You've handled the void. You can handle this. Question 7. This is what it means to become unbreakable. Not that you never crack again. You will. Life will continue to test you. Life will continue to bring you to your knees. That's not a failure. That's not a regression. That's the nature of being alive in a world that is constantly changing. But now you know the architecture of your own soul. You've been inside it. You've explored its depths. You know where the weak points are. But you also know the foundation is bedrock. You know which walls are load-bearing and which are just decorative. You know which parts of you are real and which parts were just rented from the culture. When the next quake comes, and it will, because that's how life works, you will tremble. Of course you'll tremble. You're human. You have a nervous system. You have a body that responds to threat. But you will not collapse. You will not shatter into a million pieces that can't be put back together. You will sway. You will adapt. You will find your center again. You will settle. And you will stand. Because you are no longer living from the surface. You are no longer living from the persona that was built on sand. You are living from source. From the part of you that was there before your parents named you. Before the world told you who to be. Before the wounding and the masking and the forgetting. That part of you never left. It was always there. It was just waiting. Waiting for you to clear away enough debris so it could finally breathe. Waiting for you to stop identifying with the surface noise so it could be heard. Waiting for you to come home. You are that clearing now. You are the space where truth can land. You are the ground where something new can grow. Not a better version of your old life, but a life that is genuinely yours. A life that is not a reaction to fear, but an expression of essence. A life that is not borrowed from others, but authored by you. The people who knew the old you might not recognize this version. They might ask what happened to you. They might miss the person who laughed along, who played small, who needed them, the person who was predictable, the person who fit into their story. They might try to pull you back, not maliciously, not intentionally, but because your growth threatens their stagnation. Your freedom confronts their imprisonment. Your realness exposes their performance. And that's uncomfortable for them. And you might grieve that loss. The loss of being understood by those who knew you before. The loss of relationships that couldn't survive your transformation. the loss of the comfort of belonging, even if that belonging required you to shrink. But you will not go back. You cannot go back. The door has closed behind you. Not because you're better than them, not because you've transcended human connection, but because you've outgrown the version of you that existed in those dynamics, and you cannot fit back into a container that was built for a smaller self. In front of you is not a path, but an opening. Not a road with clear markers, but a horizon with infinite possibility. Not in the future, not somewhere else, but in this very moment. Because you are no longer living for the next thing. You are no longer waiting for the weekend, for the promotion, for the relationship, for the retirement. You are living in the now thing. And the now thing is enough. It is always enough. It is the only thing that has ever been enough. You are enough. Not because you have finally fixed yourself, not because you have accumulated enough wisdom or spiritual experiences, not because you have achieved the right level of enlightenment, but simply because you are here. You are aware. You are willing to stay. You are willing to feel. You are willing to be real. And in that willingness, you have found the only home that was ever real. The only sanctuary that can never be taken from you. The only ground that will never shift beneath your feet. Yourself. Your own being. Your own presence. This is the gift of the descent. This is why you survived your own unmaking. Not to become perfect. Not to become enlightened in the way the books describe. Not to become a guru or a guide or an example for others. But to become present. To become embodied. To become real. Not to escape being human, with all its mess and uncertainty and pain, but to inhabit your humanity so fully, so consciously, so radically, that it becomes a doorway to something larger than yourself, something that was always there, but that you could never see, because you were too busy running, too busy performing, too busy trying to be someone else. You are not someone else anymore. You are you, all of you, the light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability, the wisdom and the wound, the part that was broken and the part that was always whole. All of it, finally allowed, finally integrated, finally home. Walk through that doorway now, not as someone seeking, not as someone striving, not as someone hoping to arrive somewhere in the future, but as someone who has already arrived, someone who has already come home, someone who has already found what they were looking for, because they stopped looking and started being. And let your arrival be the beginning of everything, not the end of the journey, not the final destination, but the beginning of a life lived from the inside out, a life that is yours, a life that is true, a life that is worth living, not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are being in every single moment. This is what most people never reach, not because they can't, not because it's hidden or exclusive or reserved for a chosen few, but because they turn back too soon. They stop at the edge of the fire, they run from the void. They choose the comfort of the known over the terror of the unknown. You didn't. You turned inward. You turned toward. You turned into yourself. And in that turning, you found everything you were looking for. Not outside, not in them, not in the future, but here, now, within. So now, walk, not to chase, not to prove, not to become, but to radiate, to express, to be. Let the world feel what can only be felt in the presence of someone who has touched the fire and did not run. Someone who has sat in the void and did not break. Someone who has died to everything false and found that what remains is eternal. And in that remaining, in that simple, profound act of remaining, you become a gift. Not because you try, not because you strive, but because you are, because you stayed,